So I have Will Steger with us, and Will Steger is an educator, entrepreneur, explorer, and 8-time author with titles such as North to the Pole and Crossing Antarctica. Will has blended his ability for extreme exploration with cutting edge technology and pioneered online education, reaching more than 20 million students via online daily journals and even delivering the first ever transmission of digital photography from the North Pole. Will Steger has led the first confirmed dog sled journey to the North Pole without resupply in 1986 and the 1,600-mile south-north traverse of Greenland. And it's the longest unsupported dog sled expedition in history in 1988, and led the first dog sled traverse of Antarctica in 1989. And that's just a few of his most prominent achievements. Will, it's really awesome to have you here. And it's so awesome to have this incredible opportunity to talk with you. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thanks. It's great to be here.
Awesome. So what kind of got you into, like, it's obviously you love the Arctic and the Antarctic and going into those kind of expeditions. What got you into doing that in the first place?
You know what? I'm from Minnesota, so I'm not around mountains, but I always had a fascination. It actually was the National Geographic magazines when I was younger. And I was younger in the 50s and 60s, and there wasn't the media that we have it today. It was just basically the National Geographic was almost every family had a geographic usually, but it was the stories and the pictures that I kind of wrapped my dreams around. So that gave me contact to mountains, to kayaking, and something that just did not exist in Minnesota. And then I really have to credit my parents too. I come from a big family of 10 kids, and my dad was an entrepreneur, and he gave his kids a lot of freedom, and I didn't have many rules at all. And I literally ran with the freedom. And I first did I took a motorboat down the Mississippi when I was 15 I recruited my older brother, went from Minneapolis to New Orleans and back. This is 1960, and that was the first and last motorized adventure. Then I started climbing when I was 16. I checked a book out of the library, bought a hemp rope in the hardware store. There was no equipment at all here. The only equipment we had access to was war surplus equipment, mainly from the Korean War. And there wasn't any Patagonia. There just was not any equipment that you could buy like we have today. So I started off that way, kind of a humble, sort of like I think Jack Stevenson started the same way. I mean, he broke all the rules, and he was a real thinking out of the box type of a guy. So we used to make our own clothing or packs. And then in the 60s, or very early 60s, I had access to better equipment. But once I started climbing when I was 16, I had a car license. I drove out to the Canadian Rockies in 17. And then there I started connecting with better climbers, and, really got decked out in the proper gear and so forth. So, and I did a number of first ascents in the Peruvian Andes when I was 20, and, a lot of big expeditions like that. I kayaked about 10,000 miles before I was 22. And it was kayaking that got me into the far Arctic. I mean, in Minnesota, of course, we have the cold weather. That's part of the reason I think I was attracted to the North, because I live here. And I also, I live in Minneapolis when I was younger. And I moved to Ely, Minnesota when I was 25. But it was the kayaks that really got me into the North. I was fortunate to travel north before the North changed. There was no exploitation. It was just like it always was. So I experienced, the very beginning of my life, the real wilderness. And so I just expanded out and I kept doing expeditions all my life. I made a life out of it.
That's awesome. That's really cool to do all that so young.
Yeah, it was the parents that gave me.
Yeah.
I was the key to my life with the parents is that I didn't see boundaries in my life when I was young. I mean, I like to party and have fun like any kid, but I could be really super disciplined and work hard and save money if I had an expedition or something I really wanted to do. So I had that type of determination. That's very important, I think, in extreme sports. But it was the way I grew up. I never saw boundaries. I could pretty much do physically, or it could be an education. Not always pushing the extreme edge physically, but mentally in that. And that really was important in my development as a person.
That's really cool. And so you just started with, what was closest by to you and just kept exploring out from there for the most
I
part.
did. I did.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like in the 60s in Minnesota, I never saw another climber. I never saw anyone that
Mm,
kayaked. I mean, the areas that we climb now are, you have to wait in line now to get to one of the routes. And there wasn't such a thing as a route then. And I was very fortunate to, come up from that era. And so yeah, it's been a great run for me.
yeah. It's really crazy to think about that it wasn't all that long ago that gear and the big outdoor scene that exists today was like it really was reserved for people who were just like hardcore, like made it their mission. Like you had to, like you said, make your own gear.
Yeah.
And like, Patagonia, like you said, Patagonia and Warmlite, those kinds of things, they didn't exist. So if you wanted to go, you had to like learn all the science yourself to figure out, well, these are the temperatures and this is the kind of gear I'm going to need, or this is the kind of boat. And you had to figure it out all on your own.
Yeah, it was a good. I mean, thinking out of the box, I think, is real important.
Mm-hmm.
And what you do, in the wilderness applies to your. I think it's true for most people. It applies to your real life. We all have to make a living, and we all have a purpose, or we try to have a purpose, maybe in life. And so it really adds in your development, especially as a younger person. I mean, I was raised in the city, and but I bought wilderness land off the road, very remote land up by the Boundary Waters, and then I ended up moving up there. I cleared land, I homesteaded basically. I did everything on my own, and again back then living off the land
Mm-hmm.
and clearing land and gardening. The Actually back then though you had a lot of the old timers, so they had all the information. It really wasn't in the books. You had the Back to the Earth movement in the 70s, and they kind of rewrote the older books basically, but that was a good era in the 70s. But I was actually before that time. I never joined on any bandwagon or fad or anything. I was just busy myself, and I was smart enough to know that I really wanted to place as a young kid growing up, I wanted to place my mind in the wilderness. I really trusted that, so that's what I did. I moved to the wilderness, and for 12 years, I lived on 2,000 a year. We raised our food, did all our building. We made our own clothing, some of our clothing. I mean, secondhand clothing is really a good source when you can find it.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just basically like, I think Jack Stevenson, it was that way. Put your boots on, go. Everybody
Mm-hmm.
thinks that. I get so many questions that, oh, do you need a sponsor to do an expedition? No, you don't. you know, you need a $3 jacket and a $5 pair of pants and a used store. Get going, But you need a good pair of boots that fits. It's
Yeah.
that simple. It's just that the initiative that is so important as a human being.
Yeah, I think so much of the time, people think, oh, I need to have, that's what all these, big name people have is they have, these sponsors and they feel like, oh, I need to go buy very specific types of things. And in the end, it comes down to, yeah, you need to have your ingenuity. And yes, the right gear makes a huge difference, but it's not quite as complicated as people think. It just comes down to, and I think a lot of it would come from the fact that there wasn't as much out there, so that you had to do the research yourself, which would then help you in the long, like once you got there, you had you had all the information in your head, which gave you the ingenuity to be like, oh, once I get there, I know how to problem solve.
Yeah, yeah, that's very true. Yeah, and yeah, I remember the first commercial jacket. The Patagonia had the first fleece. That was a revolution.
Mm-hmm.
Jack Kent was a revolution of that time. That was early 70s is when things start
Right.
becoming accessible. I think today people are just too materialistic.
Yeah.
They're
Yep.
they're relating to all sorts of stuff that's outside of themselves, and that's great. But it gets in the way. You don't need all the fancy gear. The fancy gear is nice. There's some really good stuff out there.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and when you buy a good jacket, it can last you for 10 years. You don't need six jackets. So what I'm
Exactly.
saying, it's accessible. You don't have to have a really good job to do the outdoors. And there's a lot of brands out there too that are not, that you can use. You don't need the best of the best. I mean, if you're doing things like on the extreme, you have to, really have
Right.
good quality stuff because you don't want equipment failure. And
Mm-hmm.
but so yeah, the wilderness it's becoming more accessible to all, not just for
Hmm.
people that have good jobs.
Yeah. It was something because I was watching, somebody's YouTube video the other day about, oh, they're getting ready to go on some expedition or the Appalachian Trail, and she had already done it and she bought more gear for it. And I was like, why wouldn't you just reuse the gear that you already had? Like, if your gear didn't last that whole trip and then do it again, then like, why not just have bought better gear the first time? You would have saved money in the long run.
Yeah, so but it's yeah, it's still a great time. I mean, we have so much accessibility
Hmm.
to materials and that, and also so much accessibility to the wilderness. To me, it's great. I mean, I'm not a person that feels I need to have it all to myself. That's absurd. I think it's great that people are hiking more, from particular in
Hmm.
Minnesota, all sorts of hiking trails. I mean, look how hiking trails have evolved in the last 10 years.
Hmm.
And the more people can get out, the better society we have. Europe is that
Hmm.
way. Europe is
Yep.
really, they don't, they'll put, it's raining, they hike in it. They just have a good attitude of being out there, and that it's really good for our society. And of course, when you're in the outdoors, you usually end up really loving it, and you become great
Hmm.
environmentalists. If you want to protect the environment, get people out there doing things, and then once you experience it, so it's more of a moral imperative because of the
Hmm.
beauty. And I mean, the bottom line of why I do everything is, it's the inspiration I get from the wilderness. My life has always been simply an inspiration. That's what I wanted. I wanted to be whatever I needed to do, and if that meant having a good diet or being exercising, and I really wanted to be in the best place as much as I could all the time. And in the wilderness, really, it's a good place to go for that.
Absolutely. Yeah, it makes a huge difference. Steve Irwin always, that's what drove him, was showing people animals and whatnot so that they would fall in love with them and want to take care of them. And so, same
Yep,
case scenario. If you go outside, you go into the wilderness, you can't help but fall in love with it.
yep, yep.
Yep. So when was kind of your very first like big expedition that like would be the grand people would think of, or I guess what would you consider your first real expedition that you're like, wow, this is like a really big thing for me? Or were they kind of all like, these are all big and they're all amazing and they all just have their own kind of feel to it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think when you're younger, when you're pushing the limit, where you don't know a lot of things, I think those expeditions are really cool. I mean, those are the ones that last forever for you. And I mean, early on, it wasn't until I was in my late 30s, I never felt I needed to talk about what I was doing. So I didn't need, I didn't need sponsorship. In other words, I did it all myself. So I was free to do what I wanted. I didn't have any demands on me, but I still had to work hard for, a couple of years on each expedition to save up money. But my earlier expedition, when I was 19, a friend of mine, Oli, and I, we took off in the southern Canadian Rockies on the Athabasca River by Jasper, Alberta. And we paddled north about 2,700 miles to the Arctic Ocean. And we met, this is back in the day, no one did that. I mean, we met all the native people, trappers and missionaries. And we even met some of the old timers from the gold rush of 1898. But we got to the Arctic Ocean. We had to get back to school. So we crossed the Richardson Mountains, which is the northern extension of the Rockies. So we went over the divide, then went down the Porcupine River in order to get to Fairbanks, to the Yukon, and then from there to Fairbanks. And then once on Fairbanks, then we both hitchhiked back home to get back to school. So I mean, that an expedition like that was a coming of age for both Oli and I, because after that, we were both city kids, but after that, now we ended up spending and raising families and everything in the wilderness, and that influence of that expedition, and I climbed them when I was 20 with a group. It wasn't my expedition, another expedition that I joined. So those were very, very influential as a young person. And then when I moved to the wilderness, I started a dog sledding and skiing school. I'd never been on a dog team before, so I got 4 dogs. The dogs taught me, and I learned how to do it. And I saved up my money, got an outfit, and I started doing courses in the winter in northern Minnesota. This is in the earlier 70s, so I made my living that way. But that introduced me to dogs, and then once I had the skills and a good dog team, I gave the school away basically. I mean, I was making good living. I could have done that rest of my life, but I did done that. So I left, basically in 82, 83, I left on a year and a half dog sled expedition. We traveled almost 600 days, 6,000 miles. We didn't have any GPS. We had no emergency thing. We lived off the land. Sometimes we were,
Wow.
400 miles from the nearest person. We got in trouble. We were on our own. And
Hmm.
I mean, that was, and that's what guided me 82, 83. That's when I started looking at expeditions differently, because I realized, hey, there's geographical firsts that haven't been done. And I always thought the North Pole was a stupid goal. I never really related to going to the pole for doing it. But back then in 82, 83 on that long expedition, I realized, hey, it unsupported, has never been done. Everyone said, so all the authorities said it was impossible. And I actually saw myself as a piece of history, because I felt I could do that. So we trained, and it wasn't easy. We raised money. I mean, I had to get, I had to go to the city, put on a suit and tie, go to Washington, New York City, and leave my wilderness life behind a little bit, because I had to raise money and I had to get attention to the geographic and media. And but we actually, pulled together, did expedition with 5 dog teams, 50 dogs total, 8 people. I mean, huge logistical. And we did it. We did it without sextant or with GPS. I mean,
Wow.
everyone now GPS. I mean, when you're doing sextant on the Arctic Ocean to the Arctic, I mean, that's the hardest thing of all. That's winner take all, because you're on moving ice. You don't know you're moving. And if you
Yeah.
get
Oh, geez.
when you get out of your, think you're going on a latitude and you drift out
Hmm.
into another latitude, well, you overshoot the pole. There's no,
Oh, wow.
regardless of how hard and how you killed yourself raising money and leading a team and dogs and all the work of that, everything is dependent on hitting it with a section, and we did it. And the anyone that goes through the pole from the land, it's an incredible expedition in that. But then from there I went on to, I met a Frenchman actually in the middle of the ocean. I mean, we had a team of 8, and this other guy was soloing, and Jean-Louis Etienne, a French physician from Paris, and he tried the year before and made 17 miles. So I heard he was trying again. So I never thought he wouldn't make it, he wouldn't get any far at all. But we literally ran into each other 200 miles out on the other ocean in the drifting ice. It
Oh,
was him and
wow.
I and that was the Trans-Antarctica expedition. And I would say that of anything that I've ever done in my life, any expedition or anything, nothing comes close to what we did in Antarctica. We met, and I met in his tent that night, and we were talking about, we were doing personal bests up until that time, and we were really, both of us were considering getting out of it, because it just was not making any sense to do this all this work, even for a geographical first. It really wasn't. It was the first to solo to the pole. But then we realized that, at that time, the Antarctic Treaty, which protects the Antarctica, was signed in 1960, but they left an opening mineral clause that they could change the treaty or whatever, and review it. Was called the Treaty Review in 1990. This was 86 when we met. And but we both, behind closed doors, the 27 treaty nations drew up a formal document called the Wellington Convention that was going to open up Antarctica for exploration for minerals, which would have been the
Wow.
beginning of the end of the continent. And this was done behind closed doors. But Jean-Louis and I, we followed these type of things, and we knew about it. So we decided right there on the spot that we would form this international team of 6 people from 6 different countries. From the 6 countries that actually founded the treaty, original ones are the ones that have the power, which is the United States, Great Britain, France, Japan, China, and the Soviet Union. So we got team members from those. This is during the Cold War.
Oh,
And
wow.
we did this amazing, we raised $8 million, which was, I was making 2,000 a year before that. And then by, I think it was more providence than anything, we survived the crossing, and we did the longest possible route. It had never been crossed before. by dogs or by on foot. And Shackleton, famous expedition, his ship was crossed. That was his dream, but we did it the longest route. And then afterwards, we met with world leaders, and I worked for a year and a half in the political realm, and then we were able to get everyone to reverse their vote because we needed all 27, and then that set us Antarctica aside for no exploration, and that would have been a problem because in the 80s, back at that time, we knew that climate change was real and happening. We didn't have the data. We needed more science. And if that would have went into exploring for minerals, all that money would have went in for looking for minerals and not the real glaciology. And so we got China on board. China had a token presence, and the president of China committed to us in front of the press that China was going to make a huge commitment to science. And now they do more science down there than the National Science Foundation. So,
Wow.
So that was a big thing. And what really changed my life, though, was on the expeditions was the internet. When I did the North Pole in '86, the 96, the North Pole unsupported to me was do or die. I was not coming back unless I made it. I mean, I was that serious about it because I knew if I made it, it would open up a lot of other opportunities. I really wanted to work on the national level. I wanted to work on policy and environment and education, but being just in Minnesota, and known in the, like a local hero in Minnesota, but if you really want to change things, you've got to go international, national. So the North Pole opened that up for me in '86. I met Al Gore, who was a freshman senator, but he gave me the study papers, the white papers on what was called the Information Highway, which was the beginning of the internet, which was going to come on board, and 5 years later. And when I read that paper, that changed me forever. And realized that I could share my expeditions in the classroom. My background is education. I mean, I got my degrees in science and master's in education. I taught 3 years, and I mean, I had enough brains when I was younger that when I was in the city, my goal was to move to the wilderness, and so my goal was to get my certifications, in other words, my degrees and teaching experience, and get that behind me, because without the certification, I couldn't do I wouldn't be able to do my own programs. I mean, if I'm a certified teacher, I can bring other teachers and other programs. So I was a certified educator, and I was dyslexic. I mean, school was just really hard for me. I had a hard time spelling and math, and there was no mercy for dyslexic people. Your history test, your final test, and boy, if I was in a place where if you got a lower grade point, they kicked you out of school.
Oh, geez.
So if you got a comma in the wrong place on your written exam, you're docked 1 grade point. I mean, if you can believe how merciless that was, but it gave me the the determination to, that I have if I'm working for something that I think is important. But the education was all on this. I ran my own school. I ran programs. I was doing incredible things in my school. I mean, it was no one had ever done that before. It was the dogs. No one ever thought of putting dogs together. I did all chemical addicted teenagers, J terms, women's courses, men's courses, physically handicapped courses. I did it all and developed new stuff, but I just was not reaching the numbers. I had maybe 80 students a year, which was great. And I still meet people on the street, and they really had an effect on them. But I gave it all away, and then went north. And then during that time, I realized, and then the internet was really opened my life up. But my goal all along, though, was for the Steger Center. I after I left my school in the end of the '70s, I realized what I wanted to do. What I could make the biggest impact in my life if I built a wilderness center in like a Camp David, to bring national, international leaders and policymakers, that if I could affect that top level in the wilderness, the wilderness setting, because you can't do it at a fancy resort and all that.
Right.
You really have to be in raw wilderness to
because the resort, that's not real. That's just more materialistic. You got to be outside. Yeah. That's the point.
It's so hollow and so stale and so depressing. I mean, people gravitate towards that. It's just it's ruining the world. We just can't,
Hmm.
but we have our choices and we make whatever choices we want. But Camp David was the only Camp David is where all the presidents would go outside of Washington, and that was my business model for that. So all I've done, all my expeditions and all the programs I've developed, has been a means to an end to build that center. And so I've been building it for 30 years. And last year I gave all my life's work and all my assets. I just gave it all away to the nonprofit, the Steger Center. I never wanted to own anything anyway, because my roots were really to live a simpler life, but I had a complicated life because of all the programs I took on. But all through my life, though, I've kept a very simple, I eat simple. I don't spend a lot of clothes on myself. And, up until age 70, I put a total of $10,000 in all my cars total in my life. I just, that's the way I aspired to. And that's why I gave everything away, accumulated this. But so that the Steger Center is really what I want to leave behind. So
Culmination of all of your work and putting it together with everything you've learned, teaching the next generation, because that's where it makes so much difference too, is bringing in the next generation. We can't let it
absolutely.
die.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely. I mean, I have some of my biggest fans are like 4 and 5 years old, and it's just so that population never changes. The young kids are really the inspiration, and all along I've taught almost at least 4 generations of people now. My oldest students are in their late 60s, in their 70s, I think now. But yeah, I think that and I knew myself when I was younger. I left the city. I left everything behind. And back in the 60s, it was really straight. You had to have your health insurance and your retirement when you're 65. And that didn't make sense to me at all. I saw my potential as what I wanted to build in myself. And that was my health insurance and my security. So I left it all behind. And first my parents didn't understand, but they understood later. But I also understood that. I mean, I think out of the box. I could have made it zillions of dollars. And I made a commitment when I was quite young in college that I wouldn't do a business. I wouldn't do a private business or entrepreneur, because I know I could be successful in that. But that wasn't what I was after. I was really after the purpose of purposeful life. And I'm 78 now, and that aspiration really pays off when you get older, because believe it or not, so many of my peers and people that are younger than me, they actually in their 60s, a lot of people are so lost. They chase their dollar and they chase their materials, and then they had a purpose, and that was surviving and making money. And then not everything, the wheels stop, and then some people might have grandkids, but beyond that, there's not a lot of people. And that's the problem with elderly people in this country, is the no purpose. And if you have a good purpose, you'll maintain your vitality. If you don't, your vitality disappears on you. And
I hate to interrupt you. We only got a couple minutes left.
Oh gosh, we didn't even get started. I didn't know we had a timeline.
Yeah, the recording only lets me go for about 40 minutes. So
okay, good. Well, let's get the advertisement in here. Let's talk about the Warmlite.
If you want to talk about, how you found Warmlite, because I know that you really love using your gear. You're planning on using it. You have a big trip coming up soon, so I want to give you a chance to talk about that too. And that was, something that you were looking for, was Warmlite gear specifically.
Yeah, well, the Warmlite, I left on this 82, 83 expedition. I mean, this was a huge winter expedition. We were going to cross the Canadian Barrens, which no one had, even the Inuit, never crossed it. And we left, we organized it. I mean, I was new at major stuff like this, but we made a selection tent, which was a dome tent. I won't say the brand, but it was a dome tent that was very popular. The climbers used it, and they used it on Everest, and it was fine. So I brought the dome tent along. And I talked to Jack, and I saw his nude catalog, and he was, at that time in the 70s, he was popular. He Kent, and I mean, I heard about him through word of mouth. Basically, I called him up and told him what I was doing, and we became good friends over a short period of time. And he actually we didn't have money to buy a tent hardly, but he donated the tent and then also his personal parka. It was his first parka that he wore. He gave me that, which was, and I still have that. I'll give it back to the family. But long story short, we left the Inuit village of Baker Lake in the middle of the Barrens, and we were going to cross 400 or 500 miles over the Arctic Ocean, and that's the Barrens was just merciless storms. I never seen anything like it. We got into our first Barrenland storm. It was 40 below, 60, 70 miles an hour wind, and it came up during the day, and we tried to set up our dome tent, and it had these 6 poles. Each pole had like 8 or 10 of these in elastic that didn't set. So we literally for 2 hours we first had to put the set of poles in our clothing, one set at a time, and dance around and get them warm, and then quickly get it straightened out. And then we got the tent up finally. Tents didn't have snow flaps back then, and then in this storm the fine drift packed between the fly and the inner body, and that then started ripping the inner body, which was devastating. I don't think we would have survived. So we sewed in candlelight. This is in the winter, so it's dark, and without heat in the thing. We sewed for 72 straight hours. We took turns trying to keep up with these rips. And then finally it broke, and then we limped back to the village, and and they taught us how to do igloos, but we were going to travel for 600 days. That wasn't going to work. So we had the Jack's tent, and I didn't really trust it, but we had to. So I had no other choice. It was a small little tent. How could this survive? And at first, it takes a little bit to understand the tent, but we learned, pretty fast. But within a week or so, we got totally comfortable in it, and it was the absolute perfect tent for us. It was super warm. It's an integral. You don't deal with a Warmlite. You don't deal with the fly in a body. That it's an integral thing, and that's one of the important things to it. And that gives you dead airspace, and you don't have snow collecting, in between the flies. You don't need snow flaps. It's it's so many things. It's really simple to put up. All you need is 2 anchor points. I can set it up in a major storm alone. And the other tent, I wouldn't be able to do it, because if you lose your tent, and it easily can just blow away on you, and all of a sudden you have no tent. It's the middle of the night, and you're really in a bad situation, especially when you're alone. So it was so easy to set up and pack down, and I couldn't believe that something that light and intricate could be, would give us such incredible security. So I've used the Warmlite on the major expeditions I did on. I had to compromise. The team members demanded more space, but I did use it on some expeditions. But the Stevenson Warmlite has always been my tent of choice. I mean, when I solo, when I'm going anywhere, that's what I use on the ice caps, and because main reason, I'm secure in it. I know it's not going to blow apart in a storm. I know it's going to be easy to set up, and I know it's going to be super light, and I don't have to deal with a bulky bulky tents, and they're stiff nylon. All the disadvantages to that. So it's been a real godsend for me to early on in my career to find this incredible tent that is so wonderful. I like it because it's custom. I mean, you can get what you want. And what I do in solos and on the ice caps, I have the black fabric on the top, and then you have the silver on the inside. But the combination of the black and the silver gives you, because you have to consider not just you have to consider the mood that the colors that you choose give you, and you have to be able to feel good in that mood and be able to write and see, and that that silver lining on the inside is perfect, even on a black surface. So on a 30 below windy day on an ice cap 24-hour light, it's comfortable and dry in there. So that's because of the black fabric. I mean, you don't want black fabric if you're in the summer sun or roasting. And then also I use on the ice caps and on these solos when I'm moving into colder or warmer weather, I have the system where you can open up the whole, one side of it or 2 sides. I use that on the ice cap. So if it gets too warm, you can vent it off. So it's the perfect tent. It's never let me down. I probably gave it the most use that any tent or brand of tent has ever been subject to. And I also like the family of and the way the tent has been made is a small entrepreneurial family. My wife Patty Steger does the Steger Muckluck. She does the same thing. She's the biggest employer in Ely, and everything's made, locally. And I really believe in Jack and the family and the company, and that I'm not buying something that's made in China, and I don't know who made it and under what circumstances. And so the tradition of who you buy your stuff from is very important too, if you're fortunate to can buy something of such a high quality. So it's real rare to have this piece of brilliant equipment made by hand and custom in the United States. It costs more, of course, because you get much more than what you pay for, actually. It's super lightweight. That's a cool thing about it. It's really super lightweight. And as you know, there's a lot of loyalty to your brand because anyone that uses it likes are proud of it and that. So so I just really I think I'm your best subject out there for it.
Thank you. So I just wanted to give you the opportunity, to talk about, because you have a big trip coming up here in a couple weeks.
Yeah. So So I've been last 10 years or so I've been doing solos in the Arctic in the far north. Actually, up to this time, I used to haul a canoe with runners. I would leave midwinter or towards the end of winter, and usually travel 700-800 miles, maybe 900 miles. And so I would haul my gear with two sleds in the canoe. Canoe is lightweight. It's but still a canoe. And the idea of the trip would be to catch the last part of the winter, and then I'm traveling on rivers that are frozen, and then I would travel rivers when they're breaking up, which is quite dangerous, and then end up at the end canoeing out. So it's an experience where I get winter to summer, and I'm also there when the migration. I mean, in some areas, there's millions of waterfowl, so almost like the Serengeti. The migration, when I leave, it's still winter, and the bears are in hibernation. But I see the full cycle of the all the migration coming in, the nesting, the birthing, the training of the birds on flying lessons, the whole thing. That's really cool. But so I'm alone. I'm in a very isolated area. So, but this year I'll be leaving without the canoe. In the past, I did one resupply. A good friend of mine's a bush pilot up there, but this time it's got 60 days solo without resupply, and I'll have 60 days of food. And but on board, I have 3 small sleds. I'll be using alpaca pack raft. So my goal would be to travel the first month or so through this wild area by the Great Bear Lake. Great Bear is one of the largest freshwater lakes in the world. It's in the Northwest Territories, right in the Arctic Circle. The southern regions of that lake is forested. The northern regions are more barren lands, and but I'll be traveling right between the barrens and the forests. This area where the trees are all shrunken up. It's really beautiful. So it's probably, I don't know, maybe 800-mile trip. And the first month I have to make it to a certain divide, the divide that separates Great Bear from the Arctic Ocean. And then if I'm able to make the divide, then I'll float down about 400 miles. And then I have to hike out to a small Inuit village called Politak on the coast. The challenge of this expedition is there's only I'm basically not able to be. I can't get in. A plane can't come in where I'm at during the breakup time, so I'm on my own. And there's only about 3 areas where I can actually get out. There's Politak, another Indian village way to the east, and on the Mackenzie River, 400 miles to the west. So it's going to be a great experience. It depends on a lot of conditions. I mean, if it's an earlier spring, it's going to be really challenging. If it's a later spring, that's what I'm looking for. But there's weather, terrain, so it's not like Mount Everest where you're going to do the top and that's it. I'm going to try to shoot for Politak. I have about 6 other routes. Contingency routes. That's what's so cool about it. There's so many variables that If I can't do one way, I'll try another way, or I'll try another way. And so the learning curve is really high on this. Um, this is even the native people would not travel at the breakup because it's too dangerous. But I have a dry suit, because of technology. Technology here is a dry suit and a pack raft. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be without a dry suit. It'd be suicide to do this because you fall in sometimes, and then you have to get yourself out. But the great thing about the trip, though, I call in every night on a satellite phone. I call into a regular voice recording for, I think I got about 5 or 6 minutes. So I call at the end of the day. I talk about the day, and then I send out my location on the Garmin GPS, and so people follow. They get the voice recording. A lot of them get it right after I send it, and then the satellite location you can zero down to with the satellite and see. You can get down to 20 meters on this, and you can see exactly where I'm at. So it's a nice trip. For me, it's there's not a lot of stress. I don't have sponsors. In fact, Warmlite's my only sponsor. I have, and so I'm not beholden to anybody, and it's a really simple way. But I am able to share it, which is really cool to me because it's really part of the big purpose, so that I'm able to talk about this to other people. And I don't advertise a lot. It kind of just gets out there, word of mouth, and people follow. So this year I'll be on the website stegercenter.org. So if people want to go on the web, or the Facebook, which is just Will Steger Facebook or Steger Center Facebook, social media, and then the word of mouth gets around. And within a couple of weeks, by the probably the 12th of April, my Facebook, I'm getting everything up to current status on the Facebook. So what you see now is not what you're going to see in 12 days from now. So we'll be able, I'll be writing up on the about the expedition more, and also on the Facebook. If you look, or on the stegercenter.org, you can see our programs that we offer. We do a lot of incredible things. We have women's. I do a lot of women's courses. We're doing an advanced timber framing course this year, doing a bell tower, and we work in the inner city. So we've got a lot of great things going on. And then under the expedition, I have some videos too that I'm going to post with the Warmlite tent and so forth, and pictures. So that's how people can follow. And so it's going to be a great time. I'll come back. Hopefully, if things go right, I'll come back. Probably the end of June. I have to be back by that time.
Sounds good. That's awesome. That's going to be really exciting. And you said that this is you've done this before, not the same route, or just the same kind of trip?
Yeah, same kind of trip. Yeah, I purposely try to do different routes, and I study a long time to find a really challenging situation. So, and these are areas some of these areas I always wanted to be in. So I'm just kind of doing some of the wish lists I've always had.
That's awesome. That's really exciting.
Yep.
Yeah, I was gonna say, when do you plan to leave? Like, when does all this kind of go live?
Yeah, I leave I'll be in Yellowknife, the territories, on the 16th of April. So it'll go live on the 12th of April, 12th, 11th of April. So another two weeks.
It's coming up fast.
I know it is, luckily.
Yep. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate dealing with all the technical difficulties.
No, that's good. You know that I sent you the video of the setup of the tent that I did.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Feel free to tighten that up, edit it a little bit. There's a couple times there was a second day out, and you'll notice I didn't adjust the poles, and the string is loose.
Oh, yeah.
Fumbling around. You can cut, I would just tighten some of that up, to
sure.
make it.
Yeah.
Because it was our second day out, and we hadn't really, just figuring things out. So.
Right. What do you do to tighten those up? Because I hadn't really thought about the fact that they would freeze, long like that. So what do you do to tighten them up do you take the caps off, or do you just tighten them up like tie knots, or?
Yeah. Okay. You just pull the caps off the bottom and you stretch it out.
Okay.
Or loosen them up. I mean, that's what the cap is for.
Right.
That's the only tent that I know of that you can adjust the tension on it. It's
okay. Yeah.
It makes a difference too, because if you're doing summer camping and you're doing 40 below, it's a totally different type of tension. And So that's another flexibility of your tent. I'll catch you later then, Jessica.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Have a good time on your
Okay.
trip. We look
Okay,
forward to
thanks.
following it.
Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Warmlite podcast. And we are so grateful to Will Steger for coming on and sharing his amazing story and his amazing journey of this is just scratching the surface. I could have sat there and talked to Will for hours. There was just so many different amazing things that he's done in his career, and it's just truly inspiring to listen to. And I hope that you really enjoyed this episode and you learned something from it, and you're excited to go and follow his solo journey upcoming expedition here in April. It's going to be really exciting. All of the links that he talked about will be in the description box, so you'll absolutely be able to find them there to follow along, or if you're coming to this later, to go and see kind of how it went and see some pictures and videos of how that expedition went for Will, taking the alpaca raft canoe up there. So yeah, it's going to be really awesome. And if you are interested in any Warmlite gear after hearing about this, that will also be in the box below. And if you select Will Steger is how you heard about us at the checkout option when you purchase any Warmlite gear, it doesn't have to be a tent, it could be any Warmlite gear. If you select the Will Steger option, we will donate Warmlite at no extra cost to you. We'll donate 10% to the Steger Center, and specifically to the Trades and Skills Program Scholarship. So again, 10%, no additional cost to you, will go to the Steger Center if you purchase any gear and you select that option at checkout. Thanks. We'll see you in the next episode.